Si Joel Escorial ay ang self-confessed killer ng radio commentator na si Percival Lapid. Mabasa ay maaaring maging state witness kung siya ay kwalipikado sa Witness Protection Program ng gobyerno. According to Justice Secretary Remulla, posibleng may pasok si Escorial sa WPP kung magbibigay ito ng mahalagang impormasyon na maaring humantong sa pagkakakilanlan ng mastermind sa pagpatay kay Lapid. At ayon pa kay Remulla, napakaposible kung iyon lang ang paraan para malutas ang kaso. Tinitignan ng National Bureau of Investigation ang pahayag ni Escorial na ang kanyang grupo ay nakipag-ugnayan sa isang taga-Bilibid para patayin si Mabasa. Ngunit ang Philippine National Police ang pangunahing investigador sa kaso, sabi ni Remulla. Sinisikap ng mga investigador na alamin kung ang Bilibid na tinitukoy ni Escorial ay ang National Bilibid Prison o ang Bureau of Jail Management and Penology. Dagdag pa ni Remulla, isa pang anggulong tinutuklas ay kung sangkot ba ang isang tao sa gobyerno sa sabuatan para patayin ang broadcaster. Ayon pa sa isang magaling na abogado na si Attorney Fortune, ay Fortune on eyewitness na kailangang tignan mo ang mga testimonya ng pamamaril. Lahat ng mga biktima ay manunood na parang basketball game. Hindi niya sinasang-ayunan ang isang krimen. Maliban na lang kung talagang well-scrutinized ang pag-imbestiga dito kay Escorial at maliban na lang kung malakas ang kanyang ebidensya. Ating panoorin ang mga pahayag ni Atty. Porton. Sa hindi pa nakapag-subscribe, follow, and share, huwag niyong kalimutan na tangkilikin upang patuloy na makapaghatid ako ng magandang balita para sa inyo.
Broadcaster Percy Lapid and alleged middleman June Villamor. Attorney Fortune, nice to have you back. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Carmina. It's a pleasure to be back.
All right, so let's first talk about this, and I want to know what you think of these cases from the outside. How would you describe the murders of Percy Lapid and June Villamor, knowing what we know at this point?
Well, it would appear that there is a chain of events and individuals who will be able to at least connect Director General Bantag to the murder. No question, you have the gunman, you have middlemen who claim to have financed the commission of the act, and then you have people who will say that they had paid the gunman through the middlemen, through the intervention or inducement of Director General Bantag. So it would appear, at first blush, prima facie, that there is a basis to charge Director General Bantag for the crime of murder.
That there are so many people involved, which translates to so many moving parts to execute, in the beginning, just one assassination. You have been in this field for quite a long time. Is this the first time that you know of something like this, or is this really how it works?
Well, to be candid, this is the first time that I've heard of people from inside the Bilibid, meaning those who have already been convicted, to be part of a plan to assassinate somebody from outside. That's why my first reaction was, why use people from inside? You can always just hire an assassin from outside and deal with that person without having to deal with the consequences and the complications of dealing with inmates. As we know, there is this principle in law. Evidence must not only come from a credible source, it must be credible in itself. So as you can see in the case of Senator De Lima, there is actually a quandary with having to utilize convicted individuals, people who have already been found to have committed a crime under our laws. And as you know, there is an issue of credibility insofar as these persons are concerned. There is always also the possibility that these people will be testifying for reasons other than the truth. I think you've seen, I think it was Ragas saying that he was fearful for his life. You had Dayan, who also suddenly recanted and said that, he was coerced into testifying in a certain way against an accused. So think about now people who have actually been found to have committed a crime. Are these people credible enough in order to be utilized as witnesses in a case that is currently ongoing?
Yeah, I think you were talking about Rafael Aragos right there. But okay, so let's follow your lead now and let's talk about that. These inmates were first in a controlled environment, and that's why they were tapped, right, to plan and execute this hit. And now that they're giving their own their testimonies, they're in that same controlled environment. And as you correctly said, these are people who have been convicted. Their credibility right there raises a red flag. Is that something that you are concerned about as well? Or what other concerns might you have that from the onset up to now, they're under this controlled environment?
I think in all criminal cases, there is this one principle. The principle is that the prosecution has the burden of proving the guilt of the accused beyond reasonable doubt. When we speak of reasonable doubt, it must be with a degree of moral certainty, the degree of proof which produces conviction in an unprejudiced mind. So if there is that the defense, all has to do is just to create doubt with regard to the testimonies of witnesses, with regard to the connections between individuals, the testimonies of individuals, even the credibility of how conversations can be made in a controlled environment like a prison. How can it be possible for communications to occur? How about the transfer of monies? I mean, again, all that the defense has to do is to prove that there is a doubt with regard to all of these evidences. And lastly, again, the prosecution must overcome the fact that the people who are testifying are criminals. And the credibility of these witnesses are going to be put to a test. The prosecution must overcome all of these biases, maybe doubts as to whether a criminal can actually testify in order for it to be able to establish the guilt of the accused beyond reasonable doubt.
Especially since Attorney Fortun, I think it was last week or a couple of weeks back, when all these witnesses started coming out, and at least one of them said they were fearful, and that's why they had to take a part in the execution of this crime. Are you concerned now that there is that same fear as they now begin to tell what they know of the crime?
Well, fear can actually go both ways. If we remember, before the gunman came out, the government had been harping about telling the gunman to come out because there's a possibility that he can be liquidated in order to conceal the crime. So, again, whether a person actually would be fearful about testifying one way or another, again, is going to be part of probably the cross-examinations that are going to be done. Whether somebody had actually voluntarily come out to testify, whether he is acting because of a fear of being silenced, or maybe testifying for a consideration. That is even a possibility.
Let's go back to the biases that you mentioned a while ago and the challenge on the prosecution's part to overcome all these biases. The witnesses, for one, being criminals, and this really affecting their credibility. Do you think that that's insurmountable? Go ahead.
No, not at all. Not at all. Again, it would be up to the judge to scrutinize the testimony of the witnesses decorum while testifying, and be able to make a moral judgment whether that person is telling the truth or not. The fact that the person has a criminal record may be a bias against him. But well, the truth is always something that can be proven, even if it comes from a polluted or a prejudiced source. So I would think that again, the prosecution has definitely an opportunity to prove the case. Although, as I mentioned, the source of this information and the testimony may be shady at the very least.
So that's the one weak link on the part of the prosecution. What about weak links on the part of the defense? What are the weak links that you can see at this point, knowing what all of us know?
Let's start with the basic premise. The accused is presumed innocent until proven guilty. The accused has no obligation to present any evidence. It is the prosecution that has the burden to prove that the evidence is strong and that the evidence that his guilt can be proven beyond reasonable doubt. So right now, I am not certain if there has been any evidence or any arguments being presented by the respondent, Director General Bantag, at this stage. I understand that there has been no counter affidavit that has been filed by him. So I am uncertain of what his defenses are and what allegations that he may have in order to prove his innocence. But from the outside, from an outside observer, well, he has made certain accusations against the Secretary of Justice, which I believe may actually be fallacious in nature. Specifically, allegations that pointing to the criminal charge against the son of the Secretary of Justice. You know, in debate that is called well, it's an appeal. I'm sorry, it's an appeal to hypocrisy. It means that you're saying that, you know, in layman's terms, so it's kettle calling the teapot black. Okay, so you know that has no relevance whatsoever. I think it would be well for Director General Bantag to just go ahead and answer the allegations directly instead of pointing to some facts which have absolutely no relevance to this case.
Does he have a choice to file a counter affidavit?
He does not have to file a counter affidavit, but if he doesn't do that, then the investigating panel is going to determine the existence of probable cause purely on the evidence and testimony submitted by the prosecution. In such an instance, probably I would say 99.5% probability that a case will be filed and that the criminal information will be filed in court.
Narinig natin ang pahayag ni Attorney Fortune tungkol dito sa pagiging state witness ni Escorial. And hindi siya pwedeng tumayong state witness dahil siya ay convicted criminal. And maliban na lang kung ito ay may konkretong ebidensya. So hoping lang na matapos na itong kinasasangkutan ni DG Bantag ang mga paratang laban sa kanya, and hoping na he will be free soon. And I know DG Bantag is innocent. Hanggang sa muli! Sa hindi pa nakapag-subscribe, follow, and share, huwag niyong kalimutan na tangkilikin upang patuloy na makapaghatid ako ng magandang balita para sa inyo.